Good morning, high school chemists. This is Mr. Matkins here, continuing our journey through our chemistry units. Excited that you were able to log on to Canvas today and take part in our instructional videos today. So before we get into our new lesson, let's talk about what we have been going over, what we have been discussing up to this point, okay? So we just recently started looking at these words right here, okay? Element. As you all know, we took a good amount of time on talking about what an element is. Element is something that you as an individual have lots of experience with. You don't know it, but you are always constantly in contact with different elements in the world. We've looked at those type of elements, how you may know some, you've learned some more, and all those great things. So elements are something that we have talked a lot about. We've talked about how those elements are classified on the periodic table. I've given you some information on how to find the elements on the periodic table, what the periodic table tells us, how it's organized. So lots of great information from the periodic table there, okay? We've also talked about in the element, we've looked at the protons, the neutrons, and the electrons that make up the element. And very briefly, we have talked and started to talk about the compounds, how two or more elements come together to form compounds. So for today's lesson, we're going to extend that discussion on compounds. Okay, so we're going to take that a step farther. So our standard today is chemistry 1.2. Understand the bonding that occurs in terms of bond type, strength, and properties. Now, this is a standard that's going to take us a couple of weeks to go through because there's a lot of good information in this one standard right here. But we're not going to go through it all today. Okay, I'm going to start off small, chunk it for you, and then we'll go into the other parts of the standard. What we're going to talk about today, though, are bond types. Now, before I get into bond types, let's talk about the word bond. Yesterday, we talked about bonds as far as humans. We have a bond with our family members, our parents, our aunts, our uncles. That's a special bond that kind of attracts us, that brings us to one another, okay? You also have bonds with your girlfriend, your boyfriends. Hopefully you just have one and not multiple of those, but you have those bonds there that kind of brings you a special connection between you and another individual. You may have a special bond with one of your animals, a family pet, but it's that special close attraction, okay? Bonds with elements are the exact same thing. It's a special bond. It's a special attraction between two or more elements. Okay, so for today, we're just going to talk about bond types, right? We're not going to get into the strength of the properties yet. We'll get into that a little bit later, but we're just going to talk about bond types. In fact, we're going to talk about two bond types. And that will be one called ionic and another one called covalent. All right, so we'll take a little bit of a deeper dive into those types, okay? You've probably heard of these before. We have talked about something called an ion. All right, so we've talked about ions before, so you'll see how ionic bonds kind of correspond and relate to ions, okay? And then covalent is it's not a difficult word to say, but it's a new word probably for you that we'll just take a little bit of a deeper dive into, okay? Our essential question up here is how does the type of element affect what bond will occur? So once again, if I were to look at this essential question here, all right, we're looking at two different things here, okay? Type, how does the type of bond or type of element, all right, affect what bond will occur? So I'll be able to give you a specific element, two elements, and I will be able to say, look at these two elements. Since you already know a little bit something about the periodic table, I will be able to give you those two elements and you will be able to look at the periodic table and tell me what type of bond will come from those two elements. All right, so our central question once again is how does the type of element affect what bond will occur? Okay, so we'll look at, be able to give you two elements and you will say, okay, you know what? It's an ionic bond or it's going to be a covalent bond. Okay. All right. So sliding on down here, as you all know, I love a great foldable. So to help you organize your notes, and so you have them all in one area and understand the difference between covalent and ionic bonds. I'm going to do a foldable with you today, okay? Now, this is probably the 256th foldable we've done this school year, so I'm going to use a lot of terminology that you should already know when it comes to foldable. But if at any point in time you need to pause the video, please do so. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to fold your piece of paper, hamburger style, with a lip at the bottom. All right, so hamburger style, lip at the bottom. All right, after you have done that, then fold it in half. By doing so, we have created a foldable. I call it a 2-tab foldable with a lip at the bottom, okay? So as you can imagine, we're gonna be talking about 2 bonds here, ionic, covalent. So what do you think's gonna go on this lovely foldable? You got it right. All right, so on the front of your foldable right here, I want you to place on one flap, ionic, doesn't matter which one, and then covalent. All right. The title of this foldable will be Types of Bonds. All right, so make sure you have your foldable outlined with that information up there, okay? All right, so moving on along here, when you open up your foldable, as soon as you have ionic and covalent, as soon as you open it up, you'll notice that you have 4 areas to write some information in. Those 4 areas are depicted up here on this board for you. This is where we are going to be recording our notes, okay? All right, so on the inside, in order to help you organize, I want you to put example up here at the top, example up here at the top right. Then you're going to put definition and definition. Okay? So we're going to talk about ionic first. So this is going to be ionic over here. You don't have to write that, but this is just for you since you're watching this at home, just to make sure that you don't get the 2 mixed up. This side over here will be covalent. Okay? All right, so ionic bonds. Let's talk a little bit about that first, okay? This is a bond between elements where one element loses an electron and another one gains. All right. So bond between elements where one gains an electron and another one loses it, okay? Now, a good example, we have talked about these elements a lot. You should already know this. NaNCl, what is that? That's right, my friends, that is table salt. We have talked about this compound a lot here, okay? Now, when we've done when we looked at table salt, we looked at the Lewis dot structure a lot, okay? So as you know, it has sodium has 1 valence electron and chlorine has 7. All right. So in an ionic bond, get another. This 1 electron right here goes over here. So this 1 element right here lost an electron, while this one over here gained an electron. That is an example of ionic bond. All right, when it comes to covalent bond, okay, this is a bond between elements where electrons are shared. Now, what I want you to do for this one is I want you to underline, I want you to box it in. I don't care what you do, but I want you to make sure that you understand that that word shared right there. Make sure that you have that somewhere, okay? A good example that we've talked a lot about is H2O. we know H2O is 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen. And what happens is their electrons, both hydrogens have 1 electron. So what they do is they share those 1 electrons with oxygen there. Okay. So the way that I like to help people remember this is covalent is sharing is caring. So make sure that you understand that. Covalent bonds, sharing is caring. When I think of ionic bonds, I think of this big O I. I. There's no I in team, right? That's because this chlorine stole that electron from that sodium element. So it's I. I want the electron. I want the electron. Covalent, sharing is caring. Ionic, it's all about me. Okay. In our next video here coming up, I will actually go through some examples for you so that you can kind of see how you will tell the difference between an ionic and a covalent bond based off the periodic table. So please make sure that you follow up with my next video. That will be some good information where we do some examples together to make sure that you have a broader understanding of how to determine the difference. Thank you.